Welcome. Welcome to another episode of The Impact of AI and Data. Each week, each episode, we explore how data and artificial intelligence impact us both personally and professionally. My name's Melissa Drew, and I'll be your host for this week's episode. This week in particular is going to be really special. I speak a lot and I interview a lot of people around the world that talk about intelligent automation, that talk about decision, bringing value-based outcomes and utilizing data and artificial intelligence together in order to achieve those goals. And yes, there are some companies out there that have certificates that you can get from your company in decision science or in some sort of AI, developing or algorithms and programs. But it wasn't until I came across Kerry Calnan. She is with Nicols University, and the title that she has is quite unique. It's VP of Innovation and External Affairs. And what's really, really, important about this interview is that Nicols College in Massachusetts has an undergraduate and a graduate certificate in analytics, but more importantly, from my research, and I think from the feedback that I've gotten from Kerry, is we truly believe that they have the first ever Bachelor's of Science in Intelligent Automation. This means that when you go to this university, you graduate with an accredited 4-year degree in intelligent automation. And that is just fantastic. And I'm super excited to have you here with us today, Kerry. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Melissa. I have to tell you, I appreciate so much. I've listened to your podcast. You have fantastic people that you've been able to have discussions with, and I am honored and humbled to be part of this. And thank you very much for inviting me.
I have so many things that I want to unpack with you, but let's perhaps start with you, and then we'll evolve into, the rest of the education and the particularly this degree, and most importantly. But how is your journey? Like, I know you've been in education for quite some time, but how did you evolve into VP of Innovation with a university?
Thank you. I'm a recovered accountant, so I spent my first part of my career really in industry, and I learned quickly. I worked for a global, I thought they were turnkey power. I looked up today and they think they're technology. So wow, have things changed, right? But I would say that I know when I walked into an engineer's office one day and he told me that I was blood-sucking overhead and didn't provide any value, when I was giving him his absorption rates for his budget, that I needed to turn the script and figure out how, all information goes through these financial statements. If any decision being made goes through the balance sheet, how do I get that information so that people can have that to make good informed decisions? So that's the backbone sort of where I come from as I entered into higher education, which we all enter for different reasons, right? Mm-hmm. I grew up in a family where, dad worked 3 jobs, mom stayed home. I was very much a person who thought that financial independence was where it was at. Having now come through the other side, I realized there's so much more value and impact that we can have, and higher education is really where to do that. So if we look at higher education, an institution that has been around for several hundred years operating in the same model, Nicols, I think is unique because we have always challenged how do we provide students that are job ready and get them something that they can be relevant in today's business marketplace. Mm-hmm. So Nicols has always been known for, instilling grit, refining grit, providing skills that we know are utilized, which led us to where we are right now within automation. So inside higher education, in the academic sense, so I spent time as a tenured faculty, and most people would never leave that, but I did come to Nicols.
Wow, that is saying a lot right there, yes.
Right, because I think Nicols really does embrace what's going on in the marketplace and how do we prepare people to get ready and enter it, mm-hmm. so that we are creating that future workforce that is in demand in all of our businesses and organizations today. I don't think that that's the mission of all institutions, and I really see it living and breathing every day in everything we do here at Nicols. which is how innovation sort of spun off. So I came out of traditional academics, well, maybe not so traditional because I came out of corporate accounting, went through academics, earned my advanced degrees to have the credential that was recognized and have, some cachet in the academic stage, and then was able to use that to go back to my business world and say, what do the people who are working every day need? How do we get people ready for jobs we don't even know what they are? And how do we continue to leverage data? Because that is really what I learned early on when I was called blood-sucking overhead. How do we get that so that students today are really positioned so that they're adding value immediately? And we know that this isn't going away, right, Melissa? This is being utilized. We started it in accounting. So our automation degree started through the accounting lens because that is both myself and the director who runs my Center for Intelligent Process Automation. That's where we grew up. So we used that network to really be a catalyst to get this up and launched.
I think you've said a lot of things that are really, really important, but I want to highlight a couple of them. I work with folks in the industry. I'm a Generation X, and there are a few baby boomers that are still lingering within the workforce, but it's predicted, Pew Research Center has predicted that in about 7 to 10 years from now, all of the baby boomers will be out of the workforce. And that leaves Generation X, that leaves the millennials, and then we've got the up and coming Generation Z, and then wherever my kids are at, they're in the next generation. And, as they move into the workforce, they're learning, they're coming in at those entry-level positions, but they're having to learn everything. And in some cases, decision science and data strategy, all of that isn't even taught in any of these colleges, but yet it's now the focal point and the underlying root of everything that's happening within an organization. I'm a huge advocate that we are working with technologies today that didn't exist 10 years ago. And we will be working in 5 years from now with technologies that don't even exist today. So it was really interesting to see this accredited degree in intelligent automation. Could you first, before we get into a little bit more about that, was this hard to get through? I'm looking at your website right now and I see the typicals. There's some that are fairly innovative. Like digital and social media marketing, entrepreneurship, sports marketing, content creation. There's some things that I think are more progressive, but was this difficult to get as a 4-year degree and get that planned out and approved?
Yeah, we're so lucky. Our president is super supportive and recognizes the need of this bridge, right, between business and technology. And we're really creating a degree and a skill set that can leverage those things. So if we talk about citizen developers, some people like that word, some people don't like that word. But we know, and as business people, I would imagine, Melissa, I know firsthand, I got hired because I knew Lotus 1-2-3 and SuperCalc, which is really the predecessors of Excel, right? So data's always been something that's been very, very valuable. And those of us who become good business people are able to translate how that data is informing decisions. I think that it is so important because of the speed that's changing how business moves, which is really being done through technology. We are really, educators and institutions as a whole, it is our responsibility to make sure that these students are ready to go into that marketplace. Where Nicols, I think, shines is because we're predominantly a business school, our alums, our trustees, friends of the college, they are all aware of this transformation that's happening quicker than it's ever happened. So the support from the president to our alumni base, to our communities that we serve has been really loud and really clear, not only with their wisdom and their talent, but also their treasure to make this happen. So I think that it's outside of a traditional academic view, right? But really is it? Because I would argue, and some may think that this is not a good argument, but I would think that what we're really doing is teaching liberal arts through the lens of business, through the lens of technology, right? Because we're teaching critical thinking, we're teaching problem solving,
Mm-hmm.
whether the tool is NICE's product or if it's, a Microsoft's product or if it's anyone else's product, those are going to change 10 times before our students even launch.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
But the skill set of problem solving, business analysis, process identification, understanding where the critical points are for opportunity to leverage technology, those skills are skills that have been around forever and will always be needed regardless of where technology takes us, right?
All of the skill sets that you've highlighted have all been listed as part of the 21st century skill sets for the future. Every one that you've just mentioned. Mm-hmm.
So, I go to my discipline. I'm, I guess I say academically trained. I would argue probably more corporate trained as a accounting and finance person for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You can be a person who wears the green eye shades and gets stuck in the corner, but the real business people are the people who can translate and be those citizen developers that live between IT that has all the data and the decision makers and getting those bridges to connect. Those have been valuable skills for a very long time. So right. I think the interesting part is, yes, we have a degree, which is amazing. But what we have outside of the traditional degree structure is our Center for Intelligent Process Automation, where students are actually outside the walls of a classroom. In higher ed, we're still stuck in 3-credit mentality, which is seat time equals learning. Mm-hmm. This center has busted that apart to really say, no, we need to have experiential opportunities. So we've engaged with client partners that have allowed us to automate some of their processes and identify sometimes processes that don't need automation. They just need to have a process fixed.
Oh, this is fantastic. So there's more than just this degree. There's this whole, what did you call the name of it?
So we call it the CIPA, and it's the Center for Intelligent Process Automation. And what makes it unique is this is really where it started. So the genesis of the degree came really from an amazing faculty, Bryant Richards, who is doing great work, who got support from alum and trustees that said, you know what, accounting is already here. You guys better catch up. Mm-hmm. And he was, one of those people who has fire in the belly, not afraid. He has some good courage, and he decided he was going to do it. So 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, he started doing it in classes. So we found that the Minecraft generation or the Lego makers, they were really good at this, right? They didn't know it. So they wouldn't have called themselves accountants per se, but they did love when we gave them some RPA to do. So when they were creating bots for processes, that made their eyes light up.
That's impressive. Yes.
So there was a spark. And then what Bryant did that was genius is he spun it off and said, you know what? The classroom walls are only going to get us so far. Mm-hmm. How do we really take this, and how can we really get it so that they can get practical experience and be pushed at levels that the walls don't push? So this center that we create is a student-run center. We believe that is also the first in the country. We partnered with a colleague from Canada and a colleague from the UK to make sure that we were providing relevant experience and opportunity. And as a result of that, we have a student-run center that is really providing automation and I would say underpinned with good foundational business analysis skill sets so that we can move in this direction. So we did an apprenticeship program over the summer. We had a client that's actually also in Massachusetts. They are in this space. They create bots for a living. They allowed us to partner with them so that our apprentices could be part of their teams working directly with clients, again, outside the traditional classroom walls. Mm-hmm. Because things don't break in the classroom, Melissa.
Yeah, no, right? They don't. Yeah, they're pretty, right.
So you need to get them into an environment, whether that's through an internship experience or, traditionally, maybe there have been co-op experiences, but this is still part of our community. So we are nurturing, growing, and developing this and seeing it break and understanding the opportunities, which then was the catalyst for us to build the degree.
And this is undergrad.
Yes.
That I think is something I wanted to really focus on, because when I was doing my undergrad, they didn't have opportunities for hey, go get an internship for a semester and then we'll give you an A for that as part of your grade class. You had to wait until you were in your master's program, and only if it was approved by, who was your professor that you were partnered with. So I heard that, and I wanted to call that out, that this is all undergrad, which is fantastic. Like, I'm just amazed by all of this. And then something you said, you used the word client, which I thought was interesting because I use the term client all the time. I'm a consultant, but it was very unique to hear you say my client coming from an academic setting. I thought that was pretty amazing.
And I think that that's some of the opportunity that we've had as we've created this center. We're very externally focused in the center. So, we have stakeholders, whether they're internal or external. Our students talk that language. So if you were to go into the center and observe some of the things happening right now, they're not back yet, but my students are over there in the center. And if you go in, they're having, conversation about stakeholder value and how do we make sure that we meet their expectation. And they're bumping into things, like I said, that don't happen in a class structure. So for instance, when they're having a scoping meeting with the client to understand what's the scope of the engagement, they're learning quickly, I better ask all the questions that I need to ask because I'm never going to get phone time with this person again.
Yes, absolutely. That is one of the hurdles to overcome very quickly. Yes.
But we don't experience that in a traditional class, right? So I think having the curriculum that supports the need that we know is happening in business and industry is very important. But having this experiential opportunity through the center, which is a student-led center, really marries it up so that these students, these young people, they really are getting ready for the jobs of the future. They're finding their curiosity. They're understanding their passion for lifelong learning. They just happen to be doing it through the sexy thing of RPA.
Yeah, right. If you don't mind, I do want to just talk briefly about what you're encompassed within the intelligent automation bachelor's degree, simply because I really do, from my own research, feel that it's not only very progressive and relevant to the real world, but I haven't found yet any other university, college, or et cetera, within the higher ed that's doing this. So what have you taken from your center that's being run by your students, and what's being pulled into to architect this degree?
So as you would imagine, there is the general business requirements. So all of the things that you would find in any business degree: marketing, management, accounting, finance, economics. And then we have, of course, general education, the liberal arts, right? So that's together. But what makes this unique is we start with a really strong foundation of, I would call it, business analytics. Okay. So I'll say that we are really looking at business process, business flow, identifying what those look like, identifying, potential, we're flow charting spaghetti charts and understanding how do we streamline. We're really teaching concepts. Not everything needs technology. Sometimes it's bad process. How do we identify the difference between those two things? We're working with client relationships and conversations when you're doing change management, which is also part of this program.
Oh, wow. Brilliant.
We know change management, especially when it involves scary words like a computer program is going to replace my job. That's not really what's happening. We need to figure out how do we give students these skills to have those kinds of conversations and navigate that dialogue, because it's a tricky dialogue to navigate. Which I think is why the center is so important, because our students are working at a small startup company, for instance, and they're talking to the CEO, who then identifies that maybe it's a scheduling tool that they want to build a bot to make the scheduling happen automatically. And through that process, they talk to the scheduler, and they really have to be sensitive, because the scheduler has an important job, and what happens if the computer does that instead of them? So this degree has that piece in it as well. It does have some, which you would expect, I would imagine, some serious RPA stuff is in there. So for instance, they are doing bot design. There's some governance, some ethical governance. Ethics is part of this degree as well. And we also have some I'll call it data visualization piece as well, so that we can communicate the story to the stakeholders.
So everything I've heard is consulting 101. Like these are the things that when we have, the entry level folks coming in, as most of the companies just call them the consultant, and then eventually they become a senior consultant, et cetera, et cetera. These are all the things that we end up having to teach them. Everything that you've just mentioned is consulting 101. Brilliant. I think everybody needs to go here. In fact, I would be excited to come check out the center.
Melissa, come
this is so fascinating. Yes.
Anytime.
Thank
we
you
have
very much.
Data visualization stuff that's happening in there. We have some AI is happening in there.
Wow.
We have obviously the bots are happening over there. Really cool things.
So
we have some VR too. We're doing some VR.
Virtual reality.
Yeah. So we have some headsets going. We're using that to experiment in different ways. Our students are creating some tools that are used in our marketing that will be launched through the, to get out to new students, virtual reality tours and fun stuff.
So I want to connect, because everything you're saying, I want to make sure that I connect it back to the real world. And I did interview last year the Chief Information Officer for Conair. Her name is Dara Meath. And one of the things that she really focused the interview on was how she's utilizing virtual reality to really improve and take personal care products into the future. And yeah, so I mean, I just, like I said, I everything you're doing, I want to make sure that I connect it back for our listeners, that you're not just out there doing this, you're out there doing this, and there is a real world application for everything that you're teaching, everything that you've allowed your students to experience.
Which is Nicols DNA. So if you were to look at Nicols, which we've been around for about 200 years, it has been in our DNA over and over and over again. And I think that the great thing is that the president and the leadership team here recognizes now more than ever, we need to keep up with that change. We need to answer that demand, right? If we look at, workforce shortage in the future, it's not going to get better. It's going to probably get worse before it gets better. Our job now is more important than it's ever been to get these students ready and provide them that value. We hear so much about, the question of an education. Is it worth the price?
Right.
I'll tell you, the Nicols degree is worth the price.
About 2 years ago, right when COVID hit, I was on a bus and there was two women in front of me, and they were talking about whether or not it was cost effective for their sons and daughters to go get a 4-year degree. And what was interesting is, coming from the business background and data analytics, they literally were mapping out the cost of the degree. And then they had done some research on the internet about how much a first year, if they got that degree, these are the professions they could go in, and this is how much they would be making. And it was just, I'd never thought of an education so tactical before, and so yes, absolutely everything you're saying I think is spot on. I think more and more people, when I grew up, it was mandatory. If you're going to, I didn't have the fortunate opportunity for someone to pay for my education. But, my father's like, if you're going to go and I'm going to help you, you're going to go and get it. Like, don't go and start it and stop it because, he's investing. And now it seems to be the opposite. It's really thinking, through the critical, strategic thinking, how much is this going to cost me? And how much value am I going to get from this degree? And how long is it going to, what's my return on investment? How long is it going to take me to actually reap back the $50,000 I just spent on this education? So yeah, you're right. It's becoming much more of a very different perspective in evaluating your educational options.
And I think the interesting thing is we have sophomores that are getting scooped up, and we're officially launching this degree this coming season. So we, through the center, have had people that are being placed at really amazing salaries.
I did want to ask that briefly. Not the salary part. I don't want to ask that, but you've said, how long has this center been going on?
The center is 2 years old, and the degree officially launches this next season. So we will award our first degrees 4 years from now in automation.
So then just a moment ago, you said that you've got some sophomores being scooped up. So this is just primarily from the work they're doing at the center.
That's correct.
And can you name off some of the companies that you're collaborating with?
I sure can. So most recently, I'll tell you that we have one of our students just went to LLB.
Okay.
He was doing automation and creating bots like nobody there could do. I think that, we have, we've worked with a company, it's called Paragus IT. They're doing automation in Massachusetts, mostly in Western Massachusetts, and they're moving into Central Massachusetts, and they've scooped up somebody through the apprenticeship program faster than they'll graduate. I think that if you were to look at the accounting space, so I have clients that are in the accounting industry, about 225-person firms. They can't get them fast enough. If we look at accounting specifically, what was expected of a first year 15 years ago, 10 years ago, is really now what the bots are doing. So what I need to train students for is to become a third year person day one.
Oh, okay. Yes, I could see that. Yeah.
So we have some relationships with firms that we're building their pipeline, especially in the labor short market that we're running in. So again, we are predominantly a business school. We've got a great alumni base. The alumni base has been really supportive. They know we're doing this, and we're getting scooped up faster than we can, which is why we knew that there was a need for this as a degree. The center can't support it without a degree.
Yeah. Brilliant, brilliant. We are actually coming to an end, so we're going to wrap up with our final question to you, Kerry. As we look at, again, connecting the real world with the academic, and I think that's what you really highlighted is working at Nicols. Is there something that you'd like to leave behind? Some key message from today?
So many things, Melissa. Thank you for that.
That's okay.
It's such an energizing thing that I'm really passionate about. Our future workforce is critical not only to the economy as a whole, but so many different things that are happening, whether it's their sustainability or many other areas, right? So developing a future workforce is something that is so important. I think if I was thinking about what do I really want to focus on, I would say that I'm so passionate about the work that we're doing. I know firsthand, having been through it as a business person for the first part, and I would continue to call myself a business person in a non-traditional environment, but I know that, organizations that are able to take young people and believe in them and invest in them, and sometimes unlock things that they don't even know that they have. That's so valuable, and higher education has been doing that for a very long time. I think that what's new to us is the pace of change, the technology as a catalyst, which we saw through the pandemic, which we've seen in many different ways. This is only going to get faster. We as educators need to get better at identifying these things and making sure that we're preparing students for things that we don't know about. So finding ways to do that through experiential opportunities, to give them real world, real life, to get them to that point where they can be seasoned when they hit the ground, but still provide the environment where they're here to mature and to find their tribe and to connect with faculty and make real relationships and network, and find the courage to do things they're afraid to do. Those are the things we do here at my campus at Nicols. And through not only our classroom, but also through our center that is very hands-on and experiential, and through partnerships, like talking with you, and partnerships that our alums make, and partnerships that our trustees and our leadership team here support. So that's a lot of things, but I think that sometimes we have to remember that as educators, our job is to inspire the vision that students don't know that they have yet. And I think through technology, we've been able to identify with that Minecraft student and really show them how Minecraft is becoming reality. You know, back in my day, it was the Jetsons, which no one would know about, right? But the Jetsons had robots that did all kinds of things. They made their food, they cleaned their house, they had robotic dogs. These things are happening in real life. We need to make sure that the folks that are in the job doing the education come up to speed and listen to industry and realize what our opportunity and our responsibility is to industry to make sure that we're preparing those people.
Your passion certainly comes through. And as a constant learner of myself, I would be excited to come and go to school here. So fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. And thank you so much for sharing something that you've been truly developing and building and sharing it with the rest of the audience.
Well, thank you, Melissa. I am so fortunate and grateful for this opportunity.